Welcome to Mr. International, for the dreamers who feel too much and want way more. I'm a lawyer who hates being a lawyer, and this podcast is my exit plan. Mr. International is a self-help travelogue for empaths, wanderers, and anyone craving freedom from a life that, well, doesn't quite fit. I'm trading courtrooms for countries, burnout for balance, and skepticism for the law of attraction. Each episode unpacks the emotional side of travel, mindset shifts, manifesting a new path, and what it really takes to rewrite your story. One passport stamp and perspective change at a time. What is up, everybody? Mr. International up here in the Heezy, and believe it or not, I am dedicating today's episode to my most recent trip to Turkey, or Turkey, however you'd like to pronounce it nowadays. Now, I did talk about it on the last episode, but I feel like I didn't give it justice. And really one of the main things I wanted to do in this new podcast of mine is to get into a bit more depth of some of the trips I go on so that perhaps you can make a more informed decision when you yourself decide to go somewhere. So this most recent trip took me to, of all places, Turkey. I was originally slated to go on a trip to Egypt, but after some deliberation, for whatever reason, I try to go by my gut and follow my heart a little bit. And my motivation for going to Egypt was starting to wane a little bit. Like, this sounds interesting, but I've seen the pyramids so many friggin' times on TV in high def. I'm not even sure if I'd be very impressed seeing them in person. That wasn't my only motivation for changing the trip. It's just that I'd heard so many more positive things about Turkey. I thought, let me check it out. And one of my good friends too had told me like it's his favorite city in the world, and he's traveled there many times. Many of my friends have told me it's like their favorite. Istanbul is their favorite city in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, you know what? YOLO, you only live once. Let me go to Turkey instead. So, sometimes I'll go on trips and I'll kind of self-organize. But other times I'll take a tour. The good thing with taking a tour is it's a type of trip you can do solo, and then you have an automatic basket of friends, if you will, other solo travelers. You usually get a really cool guide who's local, and it's a great way of seeing like all the highlights of a country, so that if you feel like you really like the country, you can always come back at a later date and explore it more on your own. So I know some people balk at tours. Sometimes you'll get these backpackers that like think they're cooler because they're roughing it and they smell like shit. And somehow that makes it more authentic. They kind of remind me of these people that, they were big Guns N' Roses fans back in the early 80s before anybody knew about them. But once they became mainstream and everybody liked them, all of a sudden they didn't like it. And they only like these garage bands, those kind of people. But that's not the way to travel. There's room for both, and there's room for you to do both. You can do self-adventure, be backpacking with the sweating and looking disgusting. And that's fun too, to its own degree, depending on your proclivities. Or you can do a tour where you get to be in a nice bus and nicer hotels and what have you. On this occasion, I decided to travel with, I think it's a newer company called Travel Talk. I'd heard good things about them. I did use them for a trip to Japan a couple of years ago. And one thing that makes them stand out a little bit is they generally put you in higher end hotels, like 4 and 5 star hotels, contrary to most like cheaper tours where, they're putting you in more budget friendly hotels. Not shitty hotels by any measure, by the way, but just slightly cheaper hotels than you would here at Travel Talk. And the difference is with Travel Talk, while they put you in luxury hotels, the price point is cheaper than most companies in general. So you're not paying a premium for all of these, these kind of like luxuries. So I decided to choose them to go to Turkey. I specifically chose one tour called the Amazing Turkey by Land tour. It's about 10 days, and it kind of takes you all to all the main highlights. Normally the group size in this kind of trip is, 12 to 42 people, maybe more. 42 is a lot. In this trip, I can't remember, but I'm going to estimate that perhaps there were, I don't know, maybe there weren't a lot of us. It was a really, really good, comfortable size. I'm going to say maybe 12 to 15 of us, which is like really a great number of people because we had the whole tour bus to ourselves. It was like a brand new bus with TVs and everything. We had plenty of space and it was intimate enough where you could kind of get to know everybody and more importantly, have personalized attention from the guide and what have you. My guide's name was Mustafa. Great, great guy. Highly recommend having him as your guide if you can choose. And, the tour basically started with me flying from LA to Istanbul via Turkish Airlines. The flight from LA's to me is not bad. It was like a 12-hour flight, direct. And I got there at night and Travel Talk picked me up from the airport in this luxury Mercedes van with curtains, just like in the movies that you may expect to see in, the Middle East. I don't know. Do people consider Turkey Middle East these days? I don't know. I know it's part of the EU and what have you. But anyway, so I got to the hotel late at night. The hotel was in a great place. It was in an old part of Istanbul where the streets are made of cobblestone and you're surrounded by the smell of like donairs and, the vibrant nightlife. And for me to see donairs like lit me up right away because when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time in Halifax, which has the most amazing donairs in the world to me. Anyway, and with that being said, I don't see a lot of donairs in LA. Or if I do, they're not nearly the type that I'm used to. So anyhow, got to the hotel. The hotel was called the Legacy Ottoman Hotel. And man, this is like beautiful. It's like built right on this cobblestone street. I think the building was sometime from the 17 or 1800s, and it's very opulent. Very nice hotel. My first room was small, but anyhow, the breakfast there was insane. I got there a day early. So my friend and I, who I was going to meet there, who's going to join the tour as well, we kind of did our own little day trip, walking around the city and walking on the water boardwalk and stuff like that. So lots to see and do in Istanbul. So it's a great place to start. Now, I will say this, and I said this in my last episode, is Istanbul in the last year or two has hit the mainstream. And so what does that mean? Hitting the mainstream really means that it's starting to get crowded. I mean, or let me just be blunt. It's getting crowded, or it is crowded. Now, when I got there, it was just starting to, but 10 days, 11 days later, when I got back to Istanbul after the tour wrapped up, the crowds had really flourished there. Now, there are two ways to look at it. When a place like Istanbul or Bangkok or whatever start hitting the mainstream of like, this is the number one place to go, and they start really getting flooded in droves with tourists, such as myself. At one level, the old school people can get a bit frustrated and be like, oh, the place is ruined. But there are different ways to look at it, all right? On one hand, there is something somewhat charming about these really touristy places where you just have a lot of people. There's a lot of positive energy. It's very it adds to the vibrancy and stuff like that, especially if you don't have the obnoxious kind of tourists. I won't get into what categories or nationalities those might be. Maybe I will later, but if people are respectful and clean and not acting like fools, when you have these crowds, it can certainly add something to the atmosphere. But on the flip side, the downside to the crowds is, well, guess what? Nobody wants to go on a vacation and have to line up. Or, I went to one of the famous mosques and I felt so bad. I was going to the bathroom and I noticed, of course, the lineup, just like you see everywhere, but even more so, the lineup to the female washroom at the mosque or outside the mosque. Actually, maybe it was a castle. Whatever it was. The lineup was huge just to go to the bathroom. Like, man, nobody, at least for me, maybe where I'm at in life, I don't travel somewhere to have to stand in a line. But anyways, let me not go too much off on a tangent. So after I, did some of the main things the first day, my tour was scheduled to start that evening. And the tour starts in the evening because that's when everybody meets at the hotel in one of the main rooms. And then essentially what you're doing at that point is just meet and greet, meet the guide. The guide kind of gives you an overview. We all went to dinner together at this nice restaurant, and then we just kind of gear up for the next day. So the next day, we, more walking tour with a group is a walking tour of Istanbul, which is really cool. And essentially, on that part of the tour, you're just like eating lunch and taking it easy. You see the Blue Mosque, which is one of the famous mosques in Istanbul. And then you kind of like gear up. And after the old city tour is done, you essentially, oh yeah, the other main thing is I forgot to mention is you go see Hagia Sophia and then the Topkapi Palace Museum. And that's where I saw like the big lineups. Now, one thing to note, and this is why being in a tour can help, tour companies can get you past all these lines. At least ours did. Travel Talk started in Turkey, actually, so they have some inroads with, I guess, the government. And while you see lines and people lining up to get into this place and that, when you're with the tour group, you kind of bypass all of that. So for those shitting on tour groups, there are some VIP pleasures that you get. The other downside, I will say, to now Turkey and not doing it in a tour is this. And even the guide said he was embarrassed about this. The cost of getting into places like museums has become absurd, like ridiculously absurd, even by American and European standards. I go to Asia and you go into a Buddhist temple and it's free. You climb up to the Buddha in Hong Kong, it's free. You do this, you do that. Like you go to all these temples and they're free. Here, like just to get into the Hagia Sophia, which I'm not even sure if it's really worth going, it's like at least 25 euros. And if you want to do more things in there, it goes up. We went to some ruins. Thank God I didn't have to pay these things because they were already included. But, we went to some ruins that weren't even that interesting. And some of the entrance fees, like to see parts of it, like were coming up to like over $110 US. And I was like, what? As an entrance fee? So in any event, some things to consider of why tours might be better, but that's kind of what I saw in Istanbul. The food is quite good. And I do recommend eating donairs, like I said, as well as trying what's famous there, which is the Turkish delight. So the next day, we moved over to a place called Gallipoli, which is a really cool place. I didn't even know anything about this. I didn't know Turkey was involved in the World Wars. But Gallipoli was this it's got white sand, blue water beaches, surprisingly. And it's where, part of World War II took place. And you get to see Anzac Cove. There's a beach cemetery, like the cemetery right on the beach. Lone Pine. There's some war trenches you can see. Because there was, I guess, during the war, that's where the fighting was going on. And ships were getting sunk there, which was kind of a good learning experience. But it was a kind of peaceful, interesting place in history that you get to see in that area. So cool area. That was actually a nice, and it's a nice ride in the bus because you get to see the country. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to spend all this time in a bus. Our bus was so luxurious. You stop all the time. The gas station stops are really cool because the gas stations there are so clean and spacious and sell so much cool stuff. Like they put to shame the ones we have here in the States. But anyhow, so that was that. Then next day 4, we went to the famous Troy, which is, from Greek mythology and also the Brad Pitt movie from many years ago, the Trojan horse. So apparently this is where all that took place. Now, to be sure, there's not much left of it. So when you go there, you just kind of see like some rocks. You see some walls and what have you, but it's nothing like what it looked like in the movie. Like there's kind of nothing left, arguably. So you're kind of just kind of there to, have a verbal or oral description. But that's Troy. You can take a picture of the horse and what have you. And no, it's not the original horse. So that's part of it, seeing that ancient city. And we stayed at a pretty cool hotel called the Signature Blue Resort. It's a hotel right on the right on the beach. I got some wicked photographs of that. And the hotel, again, I told you the hotels are all really nice, this being no exception. In fact, the one we'd stayed at the previous day after Gallipoli was this beautiful 5-star resort, like high end, very, very nice. Spacious rooms, whatnot. So that's that. Day 5, we went to Ephesus and the very famous, well-known place called Fethiye. Everybody says go to Fethiye's, but let's start with Ephesus. So Ephesus was cited in the book of Revelations, and historians believe the Gospel of John was written there. It's definitely famous for the Temple of Artemis, which was completed around 550 BC. And if you're big into like wonders of the world, it's one of the 7 wonders of the world. So we did that in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we went to Fethiye, where everybody, raves about going there. Now, we lucked out in a way. We were supposed to stay at this hotel called Hotel Greenland, which is supposed to be an awesome hotel, but I guess it wasn't ready or something. So we got upgraded to this insane resort. Like, I've traveled everywhere and I've stayed everywhere at this point. I've never seen a resort like this. It was huge. It had an arcade. It had like a shopping mall on it. It had a shooting range, an archery range. It had a freaking zoo in it. I didn't even know something like this existed. And it was on top of that, right on the beach. And it had one of the best buffets I've ever seen in my life. I can't even describe it. I'll probably start posting photographs on my Instagram for you guys to see, or once I get a website rolling for this podcast. But this hotel was like, damn. And they even had like specialty restaurants. So luckily we got to stay there for like 3 nights. And what was even better is, instead of just having to share a room, I got a whole 2-bedroom suite with a huge bedroom and my own private bathroom. And, much love to my travel partner. But by then I kind of needed some space. I'm the type of guy that, I need to decompress a little bit. And I have a hard time when I'm with somebody all the time. So that was a good break for me. Now, the downside is it was raining. And I'm cool with it because coming from LA, I'm happy when there's a little bit of rain. And I didn't mind it at all, especially with all the cool things that there were to do. Now, one downside is that I ended up missing 2 of the things I was really looking forward to in Fethiye. One of them was paragliding. I really wanted to do the paragliding there, which is super famous because you're basically jumping off of a cliff that's 6,000 feet up. It's one of the best ones in the world to do it from. And because the weather wasn't cooperating for all the time we were there, I could never do it. Now, I literally even asked the guide if I could just bribe somebody to take me up there to do it. But he said the roads are too slick because you were going up so high that nobody could even take me there. So I was kind of disappointed in that. And the other thing was you go hiking through this gorge, but the gorge was getting flooded. So again, I couldn't go. But the downtown area of Fethiye was really cool. It's one of the top places you should see if you go. Fethiye is spelled Fethiye. So that's fine. But we ended up getting to see the ancient city and just having a good time relaxing and whatnot with the group. And every night there'd be like a club and a party night with all these Russians. I guess a lot of Russians go there, like to the point where like I think some of the menus are written in Russian. For whatever reason, that fell on Russia's radar. And it kind of reminded me of Vietnam that I went to about a decade ago, where when I went to Nha Trang, which is also like this beach community, like everything was in Russian. Like it was like a Russian hotspot. So anyhow, after that was done, or as part of our trip there, like, we went to see the Mediterranean, which is called Deniz Beach, where you get to see, the turtles, and it's just a nice open beach. It wasn't crowded at all. And you can just chill out there and get a meal and relax. It was nice. You take a boat to get there, and you also get to walk through this really cool little town. So the cool little town was probably one of my favorite cities. It's called Dalian. It's a small, like, quaint town, really like slow pace of life. I was shocked at how much real estate was because I remember passing by some real estate offices and I was looking at how much the cost of things were. And this is a small town, and like a small, like, let's say 1,500 square foot home with a pool was topping like My God, it was like probably $800,000 US. And I was like, holy fuck. People think the US is expensive. Like, damn, how do people that are from Turkey afford to live here? And he said, my guide was saying that was a problem, like that, affordability and stuff like that. Because, inflation's been crazy around the world. So, and anyhow, that was that. Fethiye, very memorable, fun. And from there, we went on to Pamukkale. And Pamukkale is this natural site that has hot springs and these travertine, you know, cliffs. And they're famous too because these are these cliffs where you see these white cliff sides with these pools. They look like little pools of turquoise blue water in them where you can like swim or just like walk around in. And so you get to do that, which is really cool. And it's made by they're white because the carbonate minerals are left by the flowing water, so it's turned white. And you can even go paragliding there too. I just decided not to because it wasn't like the big one. But that was enjoyable. You get to walk around. And from there, and that was a nice little town too attached to it. So from there, we finally made our way to Cappadocia. Now, Cappadocia is like one of the big things you go to Turkey for. Why? Because it's where you see all those photographs of the hot air balloons. So you see these beautiful hot air balloons with the sunrise over what looks like somewhat of a desert and rock formations. Well, that's Cappadocia. Stayed at a very nice hotel. And of course, when you're staying there, whoops, should have turned that off, but hopefully that doesn't bother you guys too much. But anyhow, when you're staying there, what you do is, you kind of walk around the city. You see these really cool rock formations. You go to this underground city. There's an underground city of like, it's massive and it's built so deep underground. You're like, man, I can't believe people like built this thing underground way back, hundreds of years ago. And it's like 60 meters underground, believe it or not. And it could accommodate like 20,000 people. Now, the hotel there was super, super nice as well. And I did indulge myself in what's called a Turkish bath where they kind of like scrub you down. Now, what was interesting is all the people working at the Turkish bath were Indonesian. They're from Bali. Go figure. But that was an interesting experience. My travel partner who had been to Turkey before, he was kind of against it because he said it's not the OG kind of Turkish bath, but I don't really care. I'm in Turkey and it's a bath, so it's a Turkish bath to me. So with that being said, beautiful hotel. But of course, now for the hot air ballooning part, you have to wake up super effing early. Like you have to wake up at like 3:30 a.m. or 4 a.m. to do that because you want to catch the sunrise and you don't want to. If you do it, they won't let you do it later in the day because the winds change and you can't really like control a balloon. So the best time to do it is early morning. And frankly, it's kind of like one of the only times you can do it. So I did that the next day and that was really nice. The experience was something you kind of have to do. That was kind of like, there are a lot of balloons now. And I know the government's trying to crack down on that, but that was quite an experience too. You get to rise up while the sun is rising as well. And the energy of the morning is fantastic. So that was in Cappadocia. Finally wrapped up the trip, long ride on the bus back to Istanbul, hung out, bought my souvenirs and came home. Most of the time on the trips, I make a lot of new friends. And this trip, as I mentioned, the last one, I made some friends, for sure, but not the lifelong friends I'd made on like some of my Kontiki or G Adventure trips I'd been on. I'm not sure if it was me, maybe, or what, but we all got along. We had a really good group of people. And you're going to find on the tours, you're generally not going to meet many weirdos because people that are on tours and are open-minded to travel are usually pretty cool. So that was my trip to Turkey. I can't remember how much I spent, but I think the whole trip, at least with the tour side of things, which included the hotel and the accommodations, well, the hotel or the accommodations, just the hotel and the tour and everything was like, I'm going to say like $1,300 or $1,400 US. And remember, these are like 5-star hotels. And that included most of your meals, like the breakfasts were always included. And I think one of the lunches was. But the good thing is, the price wasn't that bad for what you get. Actually, it was quite good. So that's why I like Travel Talk. So that was my trip. If you have any questions, hit me up. You can leave any comments on the YouTube posting of this podcast as well. I'm happy to answer. And give it a try. Give it a look. But I will say, you maybe avoid the tourist season, which is right now, deep in the summer. Like end of June, July, August, and probably check out the weather, but try to go like off tourist season, I would say. I mean, I would say that about anywhere, but even when I went to Bangkok, I just remember like, man, it was getting really crowded, and that was not even tourist season yet. So anyhow, that's what I wanted to say about the trip. I feel like I never did it justice in terms of giving you guys a detailed description of it, but hopefully this helps you figure out if you want to do it. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions. Hope you guys have a good one, and I'll talk to you on the next podcast.